Hey, everybody, and welcome to another episode of the Sell More Book Show, episode 525. I'm Brian Cohen from Best Page Forward, joined by Alessandra Torre from
Hey,
Inkers
Ken.
Con, 7-time New York Times best-selling author. Oh my God, I'm just so glad you're here.
I'm so excited to be here. I always love chatting with you. Always fun to
Yeah.
talk shop.
Oh,
So much to talk
absolutely.
about right now.
Oh my
So
gosh. Yeah.
lots of good stuff going on.
There's
Good, bad
there's
stuff, and
lots
in
of
between.
good, interesting stuff. Yeah.
Interesting stuff. Yeah.
Yeah, no, it's interesting because Sell More Book Show, we've always been kind of a news show, but a lot of the times we vamp a little because it's like, oh, let's talk about mindset because there's no news this week. But there's news. There's a little bit of news this week. But I love talking to you because I love your event, Inkers Con. Of last year when we talked about it, you were like, I don't know, like more people watch the digital than go to the event, but still a lot of people love the in-person event. You
Yeah.
decided to keep the fun going in
Yeah.
Dallas. Um like do you think you'll just keep the in-person going no matter what because you love talking to people?
Yeah, it's so tough because you're an event coordinator. Um, it's after the event, you're always like, how could we not continue doing a live event? Like
Yeah.
there's
Yeah.
so much fun and excitement. But then at the end, we have to realize like we only have so many hours. Like so, it's like where do we want to put our focus?
Yeah.
And so we are definitely obviously doing the live show again this year, which will be the first weekend of June. Well, June
Awesome.
6th to 7th to 9th.
Yep.
Um,
Yep.
and then our hotel is like knocking on our door, like, are you guys coming back in 2025? And we're like, I don't know. I don't know. So we got the dates held for 2025 and we're going to see how this show, we already have outsold last year. So
Oh, that's
we
great.
might keep doing, yeah, we might keep doing the live event. But our love and focus has always been on digital from the beginning. The live show is just like the fun cherry on top that helps us put together a more, polished, cohesive digital product.
Yeah, and y'all just spare no expense. I'm always so impressed with your production level and I loved going to the event and speaking at the event last year and it was so fun and I definitely think that if you live anywhere near Texas or even if you don't and you want to go to an event in June, inkerscon.com, go check it out. Because I really loved the caliber of people that attend your event. And I think that there's some really good networking opportunities and just you have such high level speakers there. It's awesome.
Well, like you, we always have a fantastic group. And to be honest, so much of an event is the people that attend,
Yeah.
and that really isn't in our control. But we've been just so blessed every year. Like we just have a super cool group. Everyone is very polite. Everyone's very professional. And it's a great mix of, we are a much smaller conference and that in part helps. So we normally have under 200 attendees. We're at a smaller hotel, so it's good for authors that want to be able to talk and meet everyone and have a place and not kind of, you know, um, be overwhelmed. So it's
Yeah.
great. Yeah.
Yeah. I understand. Well, definitely, folks, go check it out if you're thinking of an event this summer. Awesome. Well, we like to look at previous week's questions of the week, and at the end of this week, we'll have a question of the week as well. So I'm going to ask you this question in a minute, Alessandra. So
Okay.
start thinking
I'm ready.
about it. Okay, good. But so the question we asked was, what is your favorite way to connect with readers? Lars Hedbor said, I love doing speaking engagements and in-person sales. Both required me to think on my feet and leave even my extroverted self drained afterward. But it's hard to beat the reader experience of hearing an author speak and receiving books directly from the author's hands. Cody C. Engdahl said, doing events, signing, and direct sales. And Jeffrey's book says, I got a handwritten letter and it was one of the best things ever. I write middle grade in YA. My new pen pal had adorable handwriting that was inconsistent, informative. Wrote him back and sent him a book for free. Absolutely framing this one, but usually book related. In-person events are my jam. I don't know if I've gotten any messages in crayon before, but I love that. Alessandra, what is your favorite way to connect with readers?
In-person signings are my favorite, even
Mhm.
though I haven't done in-person signings in years.
Yeah.
But 100%, like if, and I love that you just, I mean, it's like, it's so funny because a lot of readers like apologize when they get up to your table, like, I'm so sorry, you must be so tired or whatever, blah blah blah. And it's like, are you kidding? Like, this is the greatest, like, this is the single best day of this entire year for us, like, I mean, we just get to meet people who tell us how much they love our books. So I love in-person signings, and but I also, because I haven't done in-person signings in so long, um I really enjoy reading Instagram or TikTok posts, like
Mm,
watching her and then engaging with, because when they're making those posts, they're, to me, it's like a genuine, like they're sharing it with their audience. It's a genuine impression of the book. Sometimes it's 100% great, sometimes it's not, but I just feel like it's a very authentic. It's like I'm able to kind of peek into what this reader thinks, honestly, and then engage with them. And sometimes they get so excited, like when you interact on their post, and I love that.
that's awesome. That's yeah, I've never really done one of those for my fiction. Obviously, met author peoples at author events, but that sounds like a lot of fun. But you know what? Segue here. Not all reader signing events go well. So let's. Are you ready for today's top story, Alessandra?
I'm ready. I'm ready.
Okay, goodness. Oh my goodness. Someone is. All right. So the story for this week is called Readers Taken. The second annual Readers Take Denver event was a catastrophe for both readers and authors, according to lots of people on social media. Last year's inaugural event had a few new event hitches, but this year people had high hopes. The organizers had learned from the experience. Unfortunately, as reported by many authors and readers, things only got worse in 2024. Purportedly, said Rebecca Yaros in a Facebook post, organizers planned for just 1,800 readers, yet sold 3,000 tickets, leading to long lines and frustrated readers and authors. Quote, the wait and registration took 3 hours, and maybe that's what happens if you have 3,000 attendees and only 4 staff people processing registration, said Reddit user Critteran. Authors reported missing boxes of books valued up to $1,000. Book signings cut off by volunteers turning out the lights, lax security, and $14 beers at the sponsored bar. To make matters worse, the organizer allegedly blamed the famousness of Rebecca Yaros for many of the issues. Readers were blamed for stealing entire boxes of missing books, and somehow they ran out of lanyards and swag bags, even though all tickets were sold in advance. Many authors immediately announced they would not be attending Readers Take Denver next year because of how the 2024 event and response were handled. Just a few days later, Readers Take Denver 2025 was canceled, and even that stirred up controversy because organizers have stated they are enforcing their no refund policy, which means that any authors who'd already booked their spots for next year are not getting their money back. Oh my goodness. Where to even start with this one, Alessandra? Like,
I
what do you
don't
think?
know, and it's tough because all of my, so the event is, all of my interactions with the author hosting this event have been prior to this event, obviously, and all have been pleasant.
Yeah.
I have to approach this in watching this, which was really like a slow train wreck to watch it, because
Yeah.
I'm obviously sitting on my couch at home. And word started early on that, like, there were problems, and I heard great things about this event for the first year. I heard that there were some issues, like they had divided between 2 rooms, but they were moving to a different hotel. Like, the issues seemed reasonable. You know what I mean? Like, there are certain things you're just not going to be able to necessarily anticipate till you get there, and then you're like, oh, we thought this would work and it didn't really work. But all in all, I did hear great things from the conference. And for those listening who aren't aware, this is a unique reader event in that it's suspense authors and romance authors.
Mm-hmm.
So you're really taking kind of two different worlds and two different groups of people and bringing them all together. And so it's a big undertaking. Like it's to do this, to do last year as your very first event, if you don't have a background in event holding on event
Yeah.
coordination, it was a big undertaking. And she did a group, from all accounts that I've heard, other than some hiccups, she did a great job for the first year. So it was like, okay, second year, new facility should be good. But then the story started coming out, and early on. And again, I don't want to speak negatively about anyone else who's in the same space, because this is a space I'm in. But and certain things I just I don't know. The Gaylord kicking everyone out of the room and they obviously had another event right after that. And that should have been something that didn't happen. They should have had that conference space for hours and hours and hours after that, if not the entire rest of the day.
Yeah.
So that they put the hotel in that position, and they shouldn't have. Running out of bags, that was all, they knew all of that was going to happen in advance. So again, that shouldn't have happened. And 3-hour registrations, long registration, if you've been to Comic-Con or whatever, you're used to standing in lines. But again, it's really easy to say, like, oh, I would have done this. Like, in hindsight, it's really easy to say that. But online registration and check-in through an app could have been set up in like 5 hours. You know what I mean?
Yes.
Night before, you could have been like, holy crap, like this is going to be a problem. And I think you could have pivoted at least, so that's, I think there are, but I know, and when you put on an event, at least I am such a perfectionist in terms of being so concerned with the experience that the attendees are receiving. I can't imagine what it was like for the volunteers and for the hosts that weekend, because for me, I don't know how I would have handled the catastrophe and the backlash that has happened as a result. I have to think that she really tried her best, and it wasn't, I don't think this was intentionally done. I think this was a case of bad decisions that then,
snowballed,
got too far down the line. And then it was just an attempt to do the best that they could with what they were dealing with.
No, I think you're right. And I feel bad for the organizers and the volunteers as well, because no one wants to put on what ends up being labeled as a bad
the
event.
Fire Fest of book signings.
I've heard that. I've heard that analogy made as well. Yeah, and I think, nobody wants to put on something bad that doesn't work out. But you're right. Going with the online registration or pivoting, like that's the thing. Business plans, this from running multiple businesses. Business plans are made to be broken and remolded and reshaped and turned into something different. A business plan will last for about 5 minutes before it comes into contact with life. And so pivoting in some way, changing the registration, deciding last second, oh, we're going to have to book more space in the hotel, we're going to have to do something, would have made sense. And also, I think this is one of those things you have to keep in mind. There is nothing wrong with selling out. If you have sold every spot in an event, stop ticket sales. Stop the ticket sales, because there's a reason you have that cap in place, and you're just not going to be able to handle it if it goes beyond.
And it feels like almost a year ago that it wasn't that long ago, but when we had Book Bonanza last, and I don't know if you talked about that on your show, but Book Bonanza was put on flawlessly for the size of it. The last year, there was really a difference when you went up in size from whatever it was to what to the incremental. I think it was like 500 or 1,000 more readers that attended the most recent year, and that dramatically changed the attendee experience. That was just, and they did everything as right as they could. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
I mean, they were overstaffed. They had a beautiful facility. They had thought through. They had held big events for multiple years and were used to it. And they had a great team. And it's still, and the backlash against that, I mean, it was like almost like a venomous like surge of anger that came after that. And they really, I think they handled that as best they could. And with, um, and that was still, I mean, I think this is their last year, and I don't,
Yeah.
so I think it was multiple. I think you just get a certain size, and unless you're Comic-Con or something like that, it's it's really hard to do. And you need a
Yeah.
full-time staff for that. And to plan, most of those are planned years in advance, that you're working on those details.
Right. Right. Yeah. Happy with the smaller ones, personally.
Yes.
Yeah. So Alessandra, a hot potato wisdom question to you. How do you, and knowing that you haven't attended a signing in a bit, but how do
Yeah.
you determine if a reader event is worth attending?
I love this question. So, because I used to do 4 or 5 a year, and really the only reason I stopped was because COVID happened, and
Yeah.
then we had so many digital events, and then I used to also publish 4 books a year, and now I only do 1. So I'm
Right.
just not as much in the reader space. But for me, I always, is it an organizer who has put on these events? Is this their first year, or has this organizer put on reader events before? If they have put on reader events before, what was the reputation and feedback from that event? What is the lineup of authors like? Is it kind of a consistent niche and group that is going to, have good synergy with each other? Where, are you a dark romance author and everyone else is like rom-com, or
Mm.
is this a group that's, because you want authors bigger and smaller than you, and you want
Yeah.
authors that will bring in readers that will hopefully also like your books. And then for me, it's just like, is it a place that's easy to get to? Is it a relatively nice hotel? I don't need it to be at Four Seasons, but I don't want it to be at like the hotel, Hampton Inn. Like
Yeah.
not the airport. I'm sorry, the airport Hampton Inn. Like
Yeah.
I've seen both. So I'd like it to be, a fairly nice event. And is it easy for me to get to, or am I going to have to take 3 flights, 2 in Houston, and in order to get there in one piece? So
Yeah.
that is really for me. Now I almost only go to ones I can drive to, because it's so hard to fly with books, to figure out how many books, and
It's
to
a
do all
lot.
that. Yeah.
It's a lot. Yeah. No.
Now for you,
Yes.
how successful do you need to be for author signing books events to be worth it, do you think?
So I think this is a really good question when you are at a certain level of your career. You're a mid-lister, maybe you're writing several books a year. You're gonna have to say, oh well, is this worth 3 nights in a hotel? Is this worth printing this large enough stock of books? And I think you have to be ready to think about, okay, the first time I go to an event, I'm probably gonna lose money. You have to assume.
1,000%.
Yeah.
1,000%.
You're
You're
like,
gonna lose money.
you're going
Yeah.
to lose money, but you're going to learn things. You're going to learn, well, how many books should I print? What should my setup be like? And so that's one of the things I think authors run into trouble with, is the concept of the lost leader, the concept of
Yeah.
losing money in order to gain information. But it's the same thing with ads too, right? But like, you need to think about the numbers. You need to look at, how much am I buying these copies for? How much do I need to sell them for? You need to think like a real brick and mortar business when you go into these. And so I would definitely, if you go to an event, maybe even go to it as a reader one year, just to assess kind of like, what is it that people are doing? Start to gather information from that. And then your first event, losing money. I would say the second event, maybe losing a little or breaking even. You would want by the third event to hopefully turn a little bit of a profit, or at least to have paid for the hotel and
Yeah.
have paid for whatever kind of booth fee there is.
I used to always, when I went to signings and I went 4 or 5 a year, I was one of the bigger authors there, and I had a
Hmm.
line consistently the whole time. I still I also would pay my assistant
Yep.
for her hotel and her flight. And I would also give her like $300 for the day or something. And so I would maybe make $300 or $400. I mean, and
Yeah.
that was like it. But so I would always say, if you are, I don't want to say a smaller author, but if you're an author that hasn't yet really found like a big audience, and you can pick events that are close to you that you can drive to, that will that will cut your cost by, I mean, you won't have shipping, you won't have any of that. You can bring a bunch of books, because if you don't sell them, big deal, you'll take them home,
Yeah.
assuming that you have a amount of stock. Flying to an event, I mean, it like quadruples the expenses involved. And then
Right.
ideally, you don't have to stay at a hotel. Great. But think about the other things that don't necessarily have like economic measurability, but the ability to meet fellow authors that are, in your area, or, at least in your subgenre. Think about, maybe you only sell 5 books, but you have some like free giveaway at your table, and, 100 readers, fill out their email address
Mm.
for a chance to win, whatever it is you're giving away, and agree to be on your newsletter list. So think about the social media videos that you can make, that you can use, and, for the next month, that you can scatter about. So there are a lot of like, think of the other benefits that you could get from the signing other than just selling books.
I love that. And I'm going to even say that was the first question of the lightning round, because that's the
Oh,
answer
did we
you
get
would have
really
given,
far
right?
out?
Because it's like,
Yeah.
what do you hope to get out of them? You said it exactly, Alessandra. Some email subscribers. You make these deeper
Yeah.
connections with the readers, meeting other authors in your area. Boom! Like that's absolutely what you'd hope to get. So we're
Done.
in the
All
lightning
right. So
round.
we'll move to question 2, which
We're in
is,
move to question 2. Yeah.
Brian, do you think it's worth to lose some money on travel to make deeper connections with readers?
So is it worth it? Is it worth it to lose a little money? It really does depend on the amount of money, I would say. It depends on how deep is your backlist, so that people can make it all the way through. I think for a one book author, it can be a little bit of a tough proposition to go traveling to try to make money off of your books and try to make those connections. But if you've been doing this for a while, if this is you've got your 20 book backlist and you're finally making a deeper foray and connecting with readers or direct selling or whatnot, then you have more of an ability to lose that money and make it up on the back end. But if you're a one book author, I think you've still got some writing to do.
I love that. And I just want to say, my very first signing, I think I sat there for 5 hours, and I maybe talked to 2 readers,
Mm.
none of who knew who I was. Like, it was just,
Mm-hmm.
they walked by, they saw my book cover, and were like, oh, that looks interesting. This older lady's like, you don't look like you're old enough to write this stuff,
Ah.
But it was like, for a lot of authors, like, this might be your reward. Like, you finished a book, you published a book. Like, these events are so much fun. And it's, even if it's just you saying like, I am legitimate, I am an author, I'm attending my first book signing, like, just don't put too big of expectations. Try to lose like comparison. Like, that author has a lot of, readers stopping, and I don't. And just like, have fun. Like, that book signings can be fantastic fun. And just remember that.
I love that. I love that. I've got a question for you. Lightning round question 3. How do you think authors can get the most out of author conferences like InkersCon?
Well, I see so many authors attend conferences, and they sit in the bar or the lobby, and they just talk to people the whole time. And that is totally fine, especially if it's a conference like InkersCon, where the classes are being recorded. But majority of author conferences, the classes are not being recorded. And I think you go to author conferences for 2 reasons. One, to find fellow authors that can support you on your journey, and help build your network. And some of the authors that I've met in my first conference, I still am in weekly communication with now. And
Mm.
they have saved me money in amazing ways. They have made me money in amazing ways. So that is one of the best things about author conferences. But just do yourself a favor and just like 3 classes a day, like 3 panels a day. Like, go to the panels, go to the classes, because there's so much fantastic information that is being missed. And if you could just really honestly, you'll have networking opportunities, you'll have other times. If you can go to as many classes as possible, do it. And take notes and pay attention and just say, this is the weekend I'm going to focus on my career, and I'm going to, and really sometimes it just takes like 1 or 2 things that can change your career dramatically. Like that it's just, you just needed that one thing that you needed to hear.
I love that. Yeah, I'm a big fan of even just one piece of information can make a difference. Absolutely. You got a question for me here.
What's the best thing that's ever come out of a conference for you?
So for me, the best thing that's ever come out of a conference is definitely relationships. I'm a big fan of several of the people that I've met at events. One of my faves is Claire Taylor, who co-hosted this podcast for 3 years of FFS Media. It was funny. I was visiting in Austin, and I'd gone to Smarter Artists Summit 2016 or something like that. And I actually ended up going to the same restaurant where I met Claire, and that was really awesome. I took pictures. I was like, look where I am, and ended up hanging with her at Peter Pan mini golf that week. But like, you never know who you're going to meet. You never know what you're going to see. And those deeper connections, kind of just like how you mentioned in your first conference, still connecting with those folks, those people and relationships can lead to so much. They can really lead to so much. So, yeah. Okay. Lots of conferences have a lot of classes. How do authors, especially those attending conferences, avoid information overwhelm?
Information overwhelm is definitely a real thing, and it is at a conference more than anything, almost, because you can be like, oh my gosh, like you come home and you have a list of like things 30 deep, and so you don't do any of them because it's just too much. So I think it's important that when you're going to the conference that you like mentally prep in advance and say, okay, what is it that I really want to accomplish? Like, where do I feel like the biggest opportunity areas are in my career? What are the areas that, I think are my biggest pain points, and really identify like, okay, this year I want to decide if I'm going to go into direct sales or not. Like, that is one thing that I want to leave this conference knowing. Or this year I want to know, how to increase my foreign sales, or I want to know how to get an agent for foreign sales. And like, go to that conference with like 3 objectives. And those are the classes that you attend. And if you attend other classes, great, like fantastic. But really remember kind of like your pillars and like why you're there. And if at minimum you can get knowledge and make a decision. And sometimes that decision is like, okay, I don't want to do direct sales. Like, it's like I have now learned and explored that, and that is not something I'm ready to do right now. But then take notes. Like, there are so many brilliant things that later you're like, oh, I'm never going to forget this. Then you get home and you're like, what was that thing that I was like, oh my gosh. And give yourself permission to understand, like, oh, I listened to this person, they did this brilliant thing, they did this, but that's not going to work for me. You know what I mean? Yeah. Like, you are going to get so much conflicting information. You're going to get, this and that, and you need to kind of figure out where you are and what works for you. And something that works for someone else isn't going to work for you, and something that works for you isn't going to work for them.
Yeah, that's so true. Everyone's got a different personality. Everyone's got a different brain. Certain marketing tactics, certain publishing tactics will work for someone, but not for the other one, because you don't have the same brain as
or
them.
Books. Yeah.
Or books or genre or whatever. Absolutely. So, Alessandra, we like to ask a question of the week at the end of each of these. We obviously talked about reader events a fair bit, talked about author conferences a fair bit. The guest has the opportunity, first crack at least the subject of the question, if not the question itself.
Wait, I'm coming up with a question right now.
We're like improvisational.
All right.
Even if it's just the subject, I'll flesh it out. If you what would you want our readers, what would you want to know from our listeners here?
I would want to know from your listeners, I'd want to know about writing to market. So I'd want to know, at what point in time did you find your niche, if you found one, and how did you discover that?
Okay. What point in time did you find your niche? And how did you discover that? Great question.
Yeah.
Thank you for coming up with that on the fly. I appreciate it.
I'm impressed with myself.
I'm impressed. And so you can answer the question of the week, folks, over at the Sell More Book Show after party or at sellmorebookshow.com. Go to Alessandra's conference in June because it's great. inkerscon.com.
And if you can't come in June, we have a digital conference. Brian will have information on that in a couple months. And we'd love to see you at the digital conference, which is online. It launches in July. And we have like tons of live events, networking events, plus all of the classes that we record from the live conference. So yeah.
And those are always good as well. I love the digital conference too. Well, thank you, Alessandra. It was great having you here this week.
Absolutely. Thank you for having me.
You're so welcome. Alessandra will be back next week in the, wonders of the internet. And I'll be back too. So for Alessandra, I'm Brian. Have a great week of book selling, everybody. We'll be back next week for episode 526. Bye.
Bye, guys.